CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
I now want us to segue to our fireside conversation. So I'm just going to ask again. I know these devices misbehave, but if you have your device on, your phone, if it's the ringer is on, your volume is on, please can you turn it down so that we're able to hear. Let me invite up Ms Theo Sowa, who's going to moderate our fireside conversation. And of course, Dr. Masekela, Mama Sibongile Mkhabela, and Mama Gugu Xaba. While everyone gets up on the stage and gets mic'd, as I was listening to Dr. Masekela, a quote came to me, and I'm going to just paraphrase it, try to remember it from memory. In 1892, Anna Julia Cooper said, "Only the Black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence, without suing, without patronage, does the whole race enter with me." And I think Ambassador Masekela's keynote speaks to what it is when women, when African women speak and work. That festival has been amazing. That festival has brought so many people together. So the extent to which the women we have gathered enter in quiet dignity without violence and make mountains move. So I just want to give another round of applause to Dr. Masekela.
Okay, so first of all, hello. This is such an honor to be here to speak with you. And Mama Barbara, that was just wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. And I wanted to pull out a couple of things from what you said to start our discussion. One of the things you spoke about was the blinding light of philanthropy on the wealthy. And the whole spirit of the Adɔyɛ initiative at CAPSI is actually about how do we get back to looking at the real heart, the real spirit of African philanthropy, which has been for generations about solidarity, about liberation, about care in the widest sense, and that in its solidarity has not been, as you said, about the wealthy, but has been about the masses, has been about horizontal giving rather than some concept that we have allowed philanthropy to go into, which looks at elite giving rather than communal, societal giving. So thank you for bringing that up. And for all of us who are part of Adɔyɛ, we are so, so happy that you are a part of this. Adɔyɛ means in one of the Ghanaian languages, it means love in action. So this is what we're doing. So to start, Bongi, I'm going to go to you and ask you for some of your reflections on Mama Barbara's speaking. This whole session is actually looking at philanthropy in the light of leadership, liberation, care. Your life has reflected that in many ways. So I'm going to ask you, from your lens, for a few of your comments on Mama Barbara's work.
I have this. It's on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Theo, and it's a privilege to sit here and sit with you and have Mama Grasa there, who has been my coach, guide, mom, everything for a long time in this space, and have Sis Barbara here, with whom we've had many fights with very powerful philanthropists. And I must say we've enjoyed our fights sometimes. We didn't leave people humiliated, but we left them understanding the power of African women. And I always felt powerful. And as you know, everything that was said here is really things that Professor Beggy says we now know. Philanthropy has always been there in the continent. It's as old as the hills, he said. We need to document. And therein lies the challenge. Because when we get to documentation, often that's where we miss it. Because we try to fit into a model, and we assume that a model exists, and it exists value neutral. And I've always said that term, as it was said, the keynote speaker, Sis Barbara says, you know, the things that we do as we do them, they come so natural and so organic. But when they transition from our hands as women, they take a different face. And therefore, Peggy, when we start the documentation, the work of women changes its face because of who documents and the values that lie behind those who document. Yeah. And so philanthropy changes, even African philanthropy. It's not long we are in Adɔyɛ and we are having these conversations, and we need to watch these things. And what we begin to see are the values of you're allowed into the room depending on your budget, depending on your balance sheet. If your balance sheet is not strong enough, you can't come into the room. It's subtle, but you can already see, whereas African philanthropy, by its nature, is participatory. And once we begin to put regulations of who enters and who doesn't enter, it's the same as how we've maintained the apartheid space. We've maintained it by exclusion. It costs you so much to live in Sandton. You can't afford it to live in Soweto, okay? It's not because you're black. It's because you can't afford it, okay? So with philanthropy, Theo, I think as we document, we shouldn't lose the values. The values are also expressed. Mama Shell, purely because I didn't know you were going to be here, so I was going to abuse your name. But you do say, and this is not an abuse, you do say, every transformation of every society demands that it's led by women. And women have been leading these activism. Women don't see politics as separate from social and caring and giving. They pull all of these values into one and create a vision for society that they want. If the vision for that community is that every child must be seen, every child must be cared for and nurtured, then you will see it in how it's done. But as it goes to the hands of, I want to say the higher hands, which are mostly male, it adopts a patriarchal face. And that patriarchal face is now about status. Who walks into the room with what? Who is who in the room? And I think those are things that we as, thanks, Mom. I think those are the things we're so grateful that Mama Shell could join us.
She's getting on a plane.
I know. She took the moment to be. So those are my thoughts at the moment, is as we document, let's guard. We already, as I was doing my research, I was very impressed by how many African voices are speaking to philanthropy. What you don't see enough of is the emergence of what it looks like when it's fully documented and experienced, because at that time, and sometimes it gets confused with the notion of fundraising. And at that time, we begin to talk about individuals of high net worth individuals, and we structure it that way. And as we structure it that way, we begin to introduce new values. But the values that drive philanthropy are the values of ordinary women and men on the ground, and often women. And having worked with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund that Barbara refers to, I learned that whether we do something or we do nothing, people will always do something. And I have found that my biggest job now is to, before I say this is what we're going to do, is to find what are you doing already. So that the organization I run now, we say siyakhwezela. When we say siyakhwezela, we say we're simply adding flames and energy to fires that people are building. That takes us away from being the center stage. But that's also about documenting who we are and what we want to see going forward. Those are some of my comments.
Thank you. Mama Barbara, I want to go back to something that Bongi was just saying around people doing anyway, whether we see it, whether we document it, whether we acknowledge it. And you talked about grandmothers and HIV/AIDS and how basically our continent was not saved by scientists who brought out antiretrovirals, though they were very important. It was saved by the grandmothers who actually held our communities together. You also spoke about the power of women writing. How do we reach the stage where people truly understand and can value and see the work of people and women like those grandmothers?
Well, it's difficult because, as I say, for the most part, we do not have places where we meet formally. Because when you meet formally, you resolve that every week or every month, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to make sure I'm free to meet with other women and exchange. And I think it's very unfortunate, especially in the case of South Africa, because I think that people forget that we were in a prison here. We were not allowed to travel. We did not know what Africa looked like or what people ate. We were just enclosed. We often called it a concentration camp, especially in the case of the Bantustans, where people were so far away from the cities. So we have that legacy. But we also have a legacy of women in YWCA, for instance. Zenzele clubs,
Yes.
Yes. Do for yourself, And we have, we have our own traditional things that when somebody dies on the street, you all on that street have lost somebody.
Yeah.
And it's not only that. So we are lucky in that way. But for me, I just think that it's important for us to get our counselors, we should use the churches that are there as a meeting place. We should use the schools as a meeting place. People must get, because it's only when you have that. I'm often very frustrated. I appreciate being invited to speak to people and make a speech. But at the same time, I always feel that credit that I owe. You know, I ought to be somewhere in Roodepoort talking to women there, in their village or in, you know, whatever. So what I would say, and that's why I know, that's why I am making a call for people to participate in the national dialogue, because it is not about talking, but it's about citizenship. And it is about saying that as a citizen, I propose that such and such should happen, you know, where I live, for my children, for the old people. And I think that also what I experienced last week, I don't know if I told you, Bogi, is that I was shocked at the ageism in South Africa. Because all the people who were against the national dialogue were saying, oh, what good can they do, these old people, you know, why are there so many people on the panel, you know, and so on. But it reminds me of my own childhood, that how you just threw yourself on Gogo there under the tree and sat with her. You know, and somehow against her will, things would pop out of her mouth about history, about life, things she hadn't meant to tell you, you know. Yeah. But of course, like any modern society, we are also, you know, we are victims of migration, for instance. Yeah. You know, because, you know, in any street, you'll find very few people who were born on that street. They're all strangers there. You know, it's not like before when you walk down the street, they say, look at the mother's nose. Oh, she has a mother's ears. You know, and as a child, you just felt, oh, please, don't take away from me. But children walk in places where nobody knows anything about them. They don't have an identity. And that's why we call for clubs and, you know, book clubs. One thing that is wonderful that has happened in the last few years is the growth of book clubs. Yeah. You know. Yeah. It's a phenomenal, and I think it's something that a student or, you know, a graduate student should study, because it's a huge thing. And it's something that I wish that when I was growing up, it was there. But then there were no writers, you know. You didn't know. There were very few published writers, you know. So, yeah, we have to adapt, but we have to find ways of humanizing, you know, of humanizing ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll come back to this thing again about how we help see our humanity, which is the core of our philanthropy. But Gugu, I wanted to ask you, because very often, as Bongi said at the beginning, when people think about women in philanthropy, it's easy to think about the care equation, because people think about women in care all the time. But we also have within philanthropy, because it's time, treasure, talent, we have the knowledge, we have leadership, we have active political motivation, such as liberation. You work for Save the Children, but you do so much more. How do you make that linkage between the true spirit of philanthropy and those issues around leadership, liberation, network?
Thank you very much, Theo, for that. And it's an honor, Mampabra Sibongile, to be sitting here. And I strongly believe that I'm sitting here with the key community architects of development. And when you talk to development, you're actually talking to leaders, because how do you architect something that you are not part of and you have not experienced. So for Save the Children and for the work that I do, whether at work or personally, it's basically to ensure that communities that have not been given a voice can be given a voice. The voice that was taken away from them, and they were shown that there are challenges, there are problems, you cannot do this, you cannot do this. What we do is to bring back the world of possibility. So we are saying to them, what if we could have a day mother who is going to take care of 5 children and be able to support the 5 mothers that are going to work? Those are the possibilities we are bringing to our communities. And to our communities, and as you referred earlier on HIV/AIDS, we went in and said we can have what we called abo mama base makaya, who are taking care of the bedridden patient, and then they're also taking care of the parent. So we have brought the possibility back. And it's important to document it because we have done it. We have been able to influence development. It's just that we were then informed a lot about the problems and the inability to wash the mother. Even though you have just water and a face cloth, you could wash the mother. You didn't have to have soap because that particular patient would be better. So it's important to understand that we have developed our communities through what we have done to aid a child, to aid a mother, or a sick patient, depending who that is. The other thing that has been done, we've put up community-based organizations. And I hope some of the people that are here understand what that is. That is power. That is the voice of communities. And the competition, the infights is very useless because those are structures that must stand and bring back the voice of a community member and bring back the experiences, as you referred earlier on, to the fact that we can lead change in our own communities. We can make sure that we show that we're committed to making a difference in our own communities. We don't need an outsider to do that. If in our community we want to do recycling and clean the community, we can do it on our own and even own the recycling business so that we can be able to feed our own children. So it's important to bring back the world of possibilities, to help people to own the change that they want to see, to help people to be committed, because without them as community members, communities don't change. Recently, we're talking about baby Jaden Lee. And in this case, you had a community of school teachers. You had a community of children who knew that Jaden is not taken care of. But what did that community do? They closed their doors because that community spirit has left us. And they decided it's none of my business. So we are bringing back that spirit as leaders. People must lead themselves so that they influence the change. We've been liberated. We are free to make the decisions. And we've got the knowledge to make those decisions. So what we need now is just to work together. Remember that coalition you're talking about of women? And it's happening already. It's just that in many instances, maybe there's need for them to be convened in such a way that they see that my strength is in this area. Let me focus on early childhood development. Let me focus on gardening so that I can bring food into the community. Let me focus on ensuring that young people, as soon as they've left school, what is it that they can do within the community in order for them to, if they're not at school, if they're not in employment, what is it that they can do in order to have a livelihood? So it's important that we correlate so that we can convene communities and show them that the strength lies within those particular communities. And remember, the investments that we should make need to show that we are aware that if we develop our children, we're developing the future of that particular society. So it's very important that let's invest where children are in order to develop the bulk of society, the soul of society, Mama, that is going to sustain the change that we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. And so even on that, speaking about that, how do we move from this, a spirit almost that we have fallen into, where when people talk about development, they don't talk about possibility. They talk about crisis. They talk about pain. They talk about poverty, as if financial poverty somehow means spiritual poverty. How do we move from that framing, from the negative into the possibility, into the opportunity? Because even around philanthropy, we have made or are making our own communities feel powerless to be active philanthropists, when everything that we're saying is that they are actually the true philanthropists, that they give far more than people with millions and billions, because they are giving from the core of themselves, not just from excess profit. How do we make that change? All three of you.
I'd love to see the change. And I truly would love to see it because there is so much going on. And we've spoken about it, and we know it's there. It's how we document. It's how we bring things up. And this is where I'm saying, when we do that, often we lose the values that drive. So whoever drives the project of documenting what's going on at community, it's communities that, like I said, they will do something whether we do something or we don't. And one of the things that I've found and that have affirmed, and at the same time, this is 20 years ago, so today I'm like, ooh, would it still happen today? You talked about HIV and AIDS. The one community that I found most organized was a community of women who, at that time, we had done a research that was saying there are three things you need. You needed safety, parental supervision, and a responsive government. And we found these rural women in rural Hamatabad. They were already doing this. They had children on their list. They had a database of these children. They were providing bread every morning, which they were baking on the ground ovens and serving to each household. And when the study had said the children needed food, and they needed parental supervision. Yeah. And instinctively, or the way they saw the problem, they were already providing parental supervision. I think it's our ability to stand back and watch and reflect to the community what you see without bringing a solution. So when we look about the possibilities will come out of those conversations that are sitting at community level. And when you then begin to document, please try and not only bring the professional voices in. Keep the ordinariness of the voices that originate the solutions. Because part of the problem is, because the solution was originated on the ground, it wasn't replicated. No one was there to write and therefore to replicate what was driving this particular solution. But let me tell you, all the children who were under those women in Hamatabad, all of them finished high school. They were 3 years old when the women started intervening. They were 18 years old. That is systemic change. They were 18 years old when they finished. When the other day, one of my colleagues met one of them who's simply saying, hey, Mama, I just thought, let me tell you, I've just graduated, right? That's systemic. It means in the few years that they did what they did, they built into the community the ability to take care of their children, to dream for their children, to define the kind of community they wanted to. The disappointment in that work, one is that, the documentation often does not go along, it does not go parallel, and that is a big problem. But the second thing was, when we went to the donor and we said, let's do this. For every rand we spend as an agency, let's leave a rand in the community bank, so that when we exit, there is money in the community. Because that's the other thing, is that we know our time is valued and is paid for, but for some reason we think the time of people on the ground is always volunteered. And we said, no, we need money there. And that also for me came from, I had spent a great deal of time studying community foundations. And I knew that until and unless you bring resources that are managed and controlled by the community, you are simply doing beautiful and kind of elevated charitable work.
Yeah.
You haven't gotten to the point where you can indeed ensure that there is sustainability. We talk about our organizational sustainability, and when we spoke to donors about the sustainability of the change, we should mean decisions are going to be different. Like when we leave that money, and the donor is saying, well, if we leave that money, how do we know what they're going to do with it? It is none of our business. Frankly, it's none of our business. What we would have built there is the capacity for this community to deal with its own problems, which already we are here because they have demonstrated capacity, ability, and vision.
I'm going to ask both of you if there's anything that you can add to what Bongi has just said.
So, thank you very much for that. What we can do is to strengthen child and youth-led interventions. Yes, the community, but they are also part of the community, which means the voices of the young people are extremely important because they are living the unemployment. They are living the lack of knowledge or experience where they should have it. So it's important then that they lead the interventions. They create them. Community members, leadership, faith-based organizations, young people should come together, which means it's about time adults got to understand the voice of the child, because that's one other thing that is a challenge. We do not understand that voice, and we don't think they've got strategic interventions or inputs to make in order to create an intervention. And they must lead that intervention. They must be those financiers that are taking care of the bank account that Sibongile is talking about. It's happening already. So it means there's need to respect those structures and understand that they've got the agency and they understand what needs to change and give them the ability to do it. Thank you.
The one thing I want to jump in and say, this is really just something that kind of made me think, wow. I was at a launch of a book, Stokvel, fantastic book, Stokvel. And we all know Stokvel, right? Mm. If I didn't tell you what the meeting was about, you would have thought it's about investments. It was all financial speak. And what I think we need to be careful about when we document these things, is Stokvel is about social capital. And what was missing there was completely, it was Stokvel has so many billions in the bank and so much da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What it didn't say is that how many groups of women are continuing to work together, how many families are supported, and how can you continue to support families? Because once we lose the social capital, all what we've succeeded in doing, and I'm not saying we shouldn't bank, but we should be careful as we adopt and adapt to new institutions, that in adapting and adopting and changing track, we retain the values that drive it. And you can see those of us who are Africans and who go to funerals, you will see that the group of women who used to help with the cooking and catering have been replaced by professional caterers. We have to understand what that means. And I don't think as Africans we spend enough time to say, this erosion of social capital, what does it mean? Because all of it is what takes away from us as we see the model of capitalism and how capitalism can, in fact, go into our communities and drive our communities. And I'm not a socialist necessarily. I'm just saying it's important to understand that the markets can take over that which you build with good intention of serving community. And if we don't have, and the role of some of the people in the room here is really to continuously reflect with community and elevate and amplify the voices and what is emerging at community level. That's really the role of those that poor communities have educated, have invested in, have placed in these places. Our role is not to say, look how poor they are. Our role is to continue to present the legitimate voice and why certain institutions were established by people is not only that the banks are very proud of what they're doing in the Stokvel industry, but certainly the communities, it has eroded that which the communities were trying to build and that which we were all trying to build. And in fact, if we were to rebuild the social capital in there, we would be very powerful.
Sure.
I'm going to wrap up now because I can see Victoria coming. But before we go, because this is one of the Adɔyɛ dialogues, and so African women in philanthropy, and with that real thinking about the real heart of African women, and because we all know that African women's philanthropy is not well documented, I would like each of you just to say one African woman whose philanthropy has inspired you. And this does not need to be a name, but unless we name the people who are doing the work, African women will continue not to be recognized for their philanthropy. So I'm going to start with you, Gugu, and then come back down this way. One woman.
I can proudly mention the First Lady, or Mrs. Ramaphosa, Ulam Tsipe, as we call her.
Yeah.
She's contributing extremely to early childhood development. She's also developing leaders in the space of early childhood development. That's the one I can mention. Thank you.
I have been very moved. I don't know their names, but they are women in the Cape, in the township, who make soup for children so that the children can have a meal. And they're not rich women. They're just ordinary women. And I think they're all over South Africa's aunties who have a soup kitchen, and that's what they do because they are able to feed their own children every day, but they know more about the hunger that is there, that is, not addressed. Yeah.
No.
So I admire those women greatly because they don't get in the newspapers.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about them. And we should convene them.
Yes.
We're convening the women. Mama Agnes Xaba is still my best because Mama Agnes Xaba had nothing. And we worked with them for a long time. In about 8 years, they commanded a bank account that banks were queuing up for as ordinary women. They had no education. Ma Xaba was a retired nurse. After the work they're doing with children, they went to early adult education, and they schooled the women who were working with the children. So when I look at the value of all of that, when I take all of that together and look at their children today who are managing the program that they grew up in, and managing those monies, we're talking about them managing their own monies, managing those monies that their grandmothers had gathered. I'm like, she's my philanthropist. Yeah.
Vicky, I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, all three of you. You are wonderful.
So much. Being the person who has to call the party to moving to a close, because this is such a phenomenal conversation. So we're going to now go to question and answer from the audience. We'll take maybe, I think 2 rounds is about the time we have. We can then pick up other questions when we go to refreshments. So we'll have Q&A, then we will have our performance from our poet, Andreas Deolinda, and then we will go to closing remarks by Dr. Mati, Dr. Jacob Mati. So I see a hand up. right there, and then you can come after.
Thank you so much for this really lovely panel and for hosting it to CAPSI. You mentioned a lot about documentation, Sibongile, and Dr. Mkhabela. And I wanted to know, I think there is a lack of civics education to let us know some of the things that are happening. So the mainstream media obviously won't let us know certain things because it's not in their interest. So some of the things that you've been mentioning, we also then don't get to know things that we should know. For instance, we've got business unit in South Africa like busy trying to scratch employment equity, and we've got an attempt at privatization of water, and we already have been seeing the privatization of state-owned enterprises, less budgets in healthcare and education and other social services. So how do we perhaps amplify civics education to all the communities so that people begin to know what's happening and they raise their voices in their own interests, and we fight against this constant attempt at privatization and making things more difficult for society and communities.
Can we take, I think we go in around, so in the front and then...
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for what has been a really just mind-blowing conversation. I just had a question about, talked about how when the missionaries came and the colonial project came with it with this idea of philanthropy. So it's never been a separate agenda. It's been that the philanthropists came with the missionaries, with the colonizers, and so on. So philanthropy has always been a very loaded and ideology-driven project and process. I'm just curious about the inability, or what I've observed as the inability of the growing Black diamonds who are making a lot of money to articulate a vision around which they will drive their resources and money. And in this conversation about African philanthropy, I love that it's going back to grassroots, to what women are doing, but I'm also curious about the imperatives and the expectations that one should give to those who have been given in these processes of creating democracy and so on and so forth, being able to bring the money back as opposed to it flowing out. So I'm kind of saying, what is Black philanthropy of those who have, not just those who don't have, doing?
We'll take that one more and then...
Can I go first because I have to go somewhere?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Cindy Sibushi, and I'm a teacher by profession. So basically what I do at school, I'm the curriculum overseer. This has been such a mind-blowing session, particularly because we have been talking a lot about children and education. My question, I don't know if I want to ask it to Mama Barbara or Mama Sibongile, but let me just throw it to the floor and then anyone can answer this question. With the so many things that are happening in the school environment, particularly because teachers now want to resign, there's a drop in passion, like education is no more what we think it should be. There are so many things that are happening in schools to a point whereby, our kids are at risk. We as teachers are at a point where we don't know whether we are coming or whether we are going. Sometimes having to wake up and going to work it's something else. So I want to know what it is that we can do to bring back philanthropy to education, to the foundations of education, to teachers particularly. What is it that we can do, to give this knowledge to educators that we need to do right for the sake of the learners? Because should we not do right, or should we not have the mentality of philanthropy, then it means other people, other women out there who are working on making this nation better, it means it's not going to work out because we are not doing our part in the school level. So what it is really that we can do to bring back philanthropy into the school environment, particularly in the hearts and in the minds of teachers. Thank you.
I've forgotten. No, diamonds.
Diamonds.
No. I just want to say that one of the things that we have to practice is to build credibility. You know, you can't just up one morning and say, I'm going to have this organization and I'm going to go and ask. Because one of the strengths of our Women Writers Festival is that it is intergenerational. And we have the most stimulating discussions with people, exchanging views from very, very different points of view. But what has been very striking is that it is so respectful and it is so open as well. And I think that that is very important. And I would also say that I think that we need to be very careful about excluding people. The issue of LGBTQ is there. It's with us. We cannot pretend it's not there. And we have to try to be inclusive. But also the other thing is that, one thing I did not mention is that all of us do the festival and we are volunteers. We don't get paid. None of us get paid. Yeah. And too many of the organizations that we put together are designed to pay ourselves. I don't know what you've heard about people who work for government, but I live on a pension, I don't have any money, but I've made it a point, and she can tell you, to say that I do not want to be paid for this, because this is money. Some of the money we have comes from the very back pocket of women, working women, professional women. They say, oh, we like this so much, So they give, and they give, up to sometimes 50,000. And say, this is from my savings, but I want it to go. I also use the word intergenerational because when I go and get money, people know that they have to give it to me.
I love that.
They just, it helps. So that's why I'm saying intergenerational, because you have to have certain kinds of people in the mix, who inspire some sort of confidence, thing. But also is people ask for money, they use it, and they never come back. You have to report to the people that you got money from. They have to know how much you used, how much was left over, and what are you doing with that. It's very, very, very important. And I think this has to be emphasized, that foundations, trusts, and so on are not employment agencies. They are philanthropic organizations, and the majority of their funds have to go to the activities
Exactly.
that you know
Exactly.
you've indicated they are for.
Exactly. A quick one from me. Credibility, you mentioned it, Barbara. We have noted we are operating from a platform of lack of trust because of not being credible. So it's important that we go back and move out of the fear. I don't have this, I must hoard everything that I have, and regardless of what is happening to my cousin. So it's about time that we change the way we think. That is why, as Save the Children, we are saying it's possible. The very parent, the very teacher, and the very child have a responsibility to work together. What happened? Why is it that they're fighting? Why is it that they're at risk, as my colleague there is saying? So it's about time we see the possibility, we stop the fear, we stop the violence, because just ignoring me when I'm talking to you, you are violent. So it's important, and it's about time, my dear, that we go back to the origins of not being fearful, but building our own society, because we end up self-harming, and that is not working. Thank you.
Can I give an, it's not so much an answer as an input to the question about black wealthy giving, and linking back to how when colonialists and religious orders came to Africa, they came with a philanthropic agenda. But it was their philanthropic agenda. And in imposing that philanthropic agenda, some of which absolutely did some good things. Though I've got a very good friend who's now passed, E.J. Wynn, who always used to say that in Zimbabwe, when the church first came to the village, the church would build schools and hospitals and look after the community. Now, somehow, the church comes to the village, and the village gives all their money to look after the church.
Yeah.
So
Zimbabwe only.
some of the contextual questions. One of my biggest heartbreaks is that we still, on our continent, talk about giving in a framework that is very much about a very specific northern elite framework. So some of our wealthy black millionaires and billionaires who give, they give in a way that reflects that. And that elite form of philanthropy is so minimal, even in the North. If you look at America and you look at the freedom fighters and the civil rights, we still only talk about the men, unfortunately. But women cooked and made sure that the freedom riders could ride. Women put their money together and made sure that when people were beaten, they actually could get medical care. And they did that from the small amounts of money they had. It's much closer to the kind of philanthropy that we have in our continent, or have had in our continent. And so, for me, my inspirational women philanthropists are people like the market women at Mokola, and I'm from Ghana, from at Mokola Market. Those women have fed and educated whole generations of people without ever thinking it was anything except what they should do as women leaders, liberationists, activists. So I really am hoping that the more we explore African philanthropy from the viewpoint of Ubuntu, from the viewpoint of Adɔyɛ, from the viewpoint of solidarity giving, maybe then we can educate our millionaires and our billionaires to actually give in those models, and not only to limit themselves to a sort of elite celebrity giving, which minimizes them as well as minimizing African philanthropy.
Okay, I thought you didn't have time. The school thing that I didn't want us to seem to have ignored, the situation in our schools. And also say the situation in our schools is a complex matter. There's been so much erosion of what the school was and was intended to be. We have so moved away from the kind of young person we wanted to see as a South African young person. Many of us were educated in the Bantu education system. We survived it because of communities that decided that they will set up winter schools, other alternatives. But even in those schools, you had extramural activities which were volunteered. Now I'm going to be very controversial for 1 second. The main reason you no longer have those is the organization of teachers as workers and the demand that as workers, therefore, they cannot volunteer to do music, to do athletics, to do sports. And you see all of arts culture, all of these things have been removed from the curricula, and you need to be aware of this, of public schools, which means that the child who is educated in the public school will always come out less than the child educated holistically in a private environment. It's a big conversation. We are all avoiding it, but it's a conversation we need to confront.
Thank you.
So I know I said 2 rounds, but I think we are going to do that second round in community and refreshments outside. I will now hand over to our poet, performer, and I just want to say thank you to these phenomenal women who have shown us multiple ways of when and where we can and must and should enter. Thank you.
I'll be really happy. I'll also check you. Thank you. No, please.
Thank you.
Andreas Deolinda.
Thank you. Okay. I just want to hear, can you hear me properly? Is it good? Okay, good. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here today. My name is Andreas Ruth Deolinda. I am a poet, I am a writer, I'm a journalist, an educator, as also I do empathize with you. And it is a privilege to be here, so thank you so much, Thandi. And as a poet, poetry has always been my most expressive language. And so the poet I will read to you today is Return My Voice to Me. The title specifically I struggled with because I really wanted to grasp the essence of the poetry. And voice specifically refers to the voice to which I will now read to you, the agency that I carry, as well as the voice that we all carry in the spaces that we work in. So return my voice to me. It is strange how the softness of my spirit invites doubt, as though a gentle demeanor disqualifies my place in the world. I've always welcomed the softness of my femininity. At some point, I drifted. I became bold. I became loud. I began to walk with my head held high, even though deep down, my willpower curled at the regards of those who questioned my existence. Even now, I must admit, my voice quivers because I realize that to take up space requires one to resist comfort. Isn't it comforting that spaces like these offer the acreage to lay down stone towards reframing femininity and strength? But If you're like me, you question the whys. Why is it so hard to exist without battle? What's the point? I tussle with these questions and I ponder on my own efforts. In a world as vast as this, in a continent as rich as the motherland, where wealth is in abundance and poverty is the contrasting color of my people, I imagine the dichotomy of nature and nurture, power and gentleness, to be dividing pathways traced in opposition, yet strained to converge at some point. I consider the women who build homes with hands worn raw, the women who walk with heels forged from hardships, who have experienced the sharp wit of life, the feet scorched with fire, yet colorfully honored, each crack as a memory and each blister as a lesson. I see women across landscapes far and wide, those stirred in community with a plate serving children the streets have forgotten. I recall the efforts of the late Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Wangari Maathai, whose militant awakening bore the fertility of withering rural Kenya, sowing seedlings to rehabilitate with every seed a green defiance arose. A belt of obstinate resolve cultivated a movement that continues to empower nations and women. I've begun to stimulate the idea that to act is to awaken a radical stance towards change. But it starts with defining your place. And in doing so, I evoke a personal narrative, boasting the power of education intertwined with art, in a world where apathy stains our youth, and boldness is not a luxury, but a necessary line under our name. In literature, I find my sanctuary, the joy of language to liberate, to connect, to remind us of our shared humanity. But I mourn what we've lost, the intimacy of learning, the agency stolen as we trade pages for pixels and choose distractions over the lyrical freedoms of written thought. If we are to craft a terrain for transformation, let it begin with restoring the power of education. Let us raise a generation rooted in knowing, guided by story, and awakened to possibility. I draw strength from the boldness of women I consider powerhouses, the Chimamanda Ngozi Adichis, who blaze the matriarchal fire, leveling the playing field for equality. And because through them, I have permission to act. How fortunate are we to witness the paths carved before us, for by women who have had to prove again and again that they belonged. And still, we echo the same cadence, only now we defend our place with a blueprint in hand. Even today, we pay respect to Dr. Barbara Masekela, who nurtures the arts and harnesses the essence of freedom as a unified front for our shared Africanity. While it begins with us now, may our torch set alight the path for our children in upholding the legacy of Ms. Sibongile Mkhabela and Ms. Gugu Xaba. It is wise not to assume our gifts as mere ideologies, as if to say, who am I that I should? The criminality of assumptions wrestles in pervasive language where the power of words, nestled in the condition of the human heart, breeds narratives of worthlessness disguised as humility and silences brilliance before it even learns to speak. Forced conformity, even if unintentional or institutionalized, is bred as a result of our own fear of disruption, our quiet complicity to comfort, and an illusion that dreaming is only permissive to a particular class of people. Therefore, when we consider our efforts as women, we must consider ourselves the first flame. In our creativity, we bred patterns towards liberation. And if I may, while a man possesses a quality for change, raise the woman and witness her unyielding amber and force. And so I implore us, therefore, to set alight our resolve, awaken our innate gifts, and choose action in the place of fear. Our Africa awaits your revolution. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have had phenomenal women this morning. Is it morning, afternoon already? Yes, and I think I'm standing here to spoil for them, but I'm probably an honorary woman today. Okay, thank you. Before I do one or two things, in terms of offering my sincere thanks, I think I need to recognize the presence of our director, Professor Moyo, who yesterday we were talking, I think he was somewhere in the flights and things like that. He's spending his time on sabbatical trying to make sense of some of the things that are being spoken here. But I think it's great, and I don't know whether you want to say anything. You're good? Okay, thank you. Before I do a few thanks, let me read from the book of Mark, chapter 12, verse 42 to 44. In my moments, sometimes I read the Bible, and I find a lot of inspiration in it. And this is no offense to those that do not subscribe to Christianity, but you hear what I want to say. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which made a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing in the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Stories of women giving their all in the Bible are many. If you go to 1 Kings chapter 17, 18 to 16, there's also another story of Prophet Elijah being told to go somewhere, and he's told that, and again, another widow is told to cook the very little flour in the jar and all the olive oil that she had. Elijah asked this lady to do this, and she does as she's instructed. But the story doesn't end there. It says that there is a promise that is made to this lady that her jars of the oil and the flour will never be empty. I think the context that the stories that we've had from Dr. Barbara's childhood, her grandmother, her mother, to Sibongile and many of the other things. Sometimes there's a lot of struggle in what our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers are doing. And they do it, they give their all. But out of that particular giving, however much they are struggling, their jars never run dry because of the blessings and everything else. Those that are spiritual, I think those are great moments to reflect on. But at the same time, I think there's also a challenge on formal governance and social protection structures to be able to do more so that we do not continue burdening this in spaces where, or in countries where we have a lot of abundance, but at the same time, there are so many of us that, so many children that go hungry, so many young men and women who have nothing to do after school and things like that. So I think these are things to ponder. But as I end, I think besides those particular reflections, tomorrow is Mandela Day, and this particular discussion was actually brought about as our own contributions to Mandela. I mean CAPSI and WBS, but in so many ways. And initially, I felt when I heard about the profiles of the ladies who were coming to commune with us, I said, maybe we'll be dimming their light in honor of a great man, definitely, but probably let's do it at another time where we don't continue dimming their lights. But I'm glad that I was convinced otherwise, because you've done a fantastic thing. You've a fantastic job this morning and afternoon for that matter. And thank you very much. I know some have left, but they'll hear about this. But there was also those that worked with Tandy, who drives this particular process. She has been phenomenal in that regard, but she also works with phenomenal women from across the continent, with a steering committee that works closely with her, advising her with many meetings, including with Theo there. Thank you very much. Their constant guidance have been quite helpful to Tandy, to CAPSI, and I think to the school. And we are forever grateful for that. And thank you for nurturing this particular source, so to speak. But I think in as much as Professor Hadebe mentioned Sandile, I think we need to thank him. I know he has also left to take Ma Barbara wherever she needed to go, but I think we need to thank him quite a lot. And on behalf of his cohort in the Masters in African Philanthropy class at the moment, I can see quite a good number of them here. We need to deeply thank him and for the insights, but also the deep value that this particular conversation has brought, especially to me, but I believe each and every one of us in this particular room. CAPSI has many dedicated, we are not that many, but we have a dedicated team led by, I saw her there, Mpo Mwowe, who oversees our convening. Thank you, Mpo, but with a lot of support from our WBS colleagues in marketing and communications. Thank you very much. The technical team, you can see them here in doing all the recordings. Our speakers, our performer, thank you. I think you've all showed love in action in one form or another. And I think in as much as we may not want to glorify those with deeper pockets, we are also indebted to some extent, because unless we develop new ways of raising revenue for what we do as a center, we still are indebted to groups like the Fond Foundation, Mod Foundation, Mastercard Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation New York, the Schooner Foundation, and many others who have helped fund the center for the longest since the beginning in one form or another. And we thank them for that and for their continued support. There will be many more of these kinds of dialogues. The Women's Month is coming. We hope to, Tandy will give us something again pretty soon, and many others definitely through CAPSI. I think in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much for all of you for gracing this occasion. Thank you.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.